United States has adopted increasingly hostile policies against a number of countries around the world. Geopolitical experts say that is because the U.S. wants to pressure nations that do not fall in line with its agenda. America has used different methods, including economic sanctions, to try to isolate its rivals or governments that it deems unfriendly. Some of the most notable examples of such U.S. hostility are the measures taken against Russia, China, and Iran. The U.S. has imposed several rounds of sanctions against the Russian government and individuals close to President Vladimir Putin. The U.S. leadership is especially infuriated by Moscow's anti-terror campaign in Syria, where the U.S. has intervened to protect its own interests and those of its regional allies. China is a target too. The U.S. has practically entered a trade war with China and is doing all in its power to try to contain China's growing influence globally. The United States has many staunch allies in the Middle East. The autocratic regime of Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Israel are some of the cronies that America heavily depends on to advance its agenda in the Middle East and beyond. But some regional players have refused to give in. The most notable of them is Iran, which leads an anti-U.S. and anti-Israeli front in the region. Just like Russia and China, Iran has been a target for different types of sanctions. U.S. hostility against Iran has been ongoing over the past decades. U.S. President Donald Trump is now threatening to scrap a landmark nuclear deal with the Islamic Republic and intensify anti-Iran efforts. A top Iranian security official says it is vital for Tehran, Moscow, and Beijing to join hands to counter U.S. attempts at harming the three countries.
Location of Iran as a geography which is on the crossroad of this Eurasian connectivity is much more important than Trumpian foreign policy or the current short-sighted foreign policy that we're seeing that is being exercised in Washington. So both Beijing and Moscow will be looking at this in the long term, and they will certainly do what's in their best interest, not collective interest of Washington.
Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, Ali Shamkhani, says Tehran, Moscow, and Beijing need to work out a joint strategy to confront the United States. Observers believe the three countries can cooperate in many fields to lessen the effects of Western sanctions against them.
The United States has its own problems with Russia and with China, and one of those problems happens to be the Iran deal. However, at the end of the day, what Beijing and Moscow will do is what's to their best interest, not to the best interests of Washington and the United States. So they will be looking at their own national security strategy. And thus far, we've seen it with the Russians, we've seen it with the Chinese. Their economic interest is number one priority for them. So regardless of what happens with this deal, my prediction is the Russians are going to be also keeping their promises with Tehran. Also, the Chinese will.
Speaking on the sidelines of a security conference in Russia, the top Iranian security official also warned that sponsors of terrorism are relocating the remnants of dangerous militant groups from Syria and Iraq to Afghanistan. Shamkhani said such deployment of terrorist groups to Afghan territory will pose serious threats to Iran, China, and Russia. Many observers believe Shamkhani's initiative needs to be taken seriously if the three countries want to effectively limit America's options in the region and challenge its policies.